Janna was 40, and after 16 years of marriage, she was returning to work. Her twin girls are now 14 years old, and with a full-time housekeeper, made possible by her husband's income, she decided to return to her profession. 6 weeks ago, she was hired by a new, up-and-coming company that was moving to larger, more luxurious offices. She was delighted with the new job. During the interview process, she met the firm's partners, 3 men and 1 woman, and was impressed by their enthusiasm, warmth, and professionalism. The partners were also impressed by her personality, credentials, professional demeanor, and what they considered to be a strong work ethic. Her immediate colleagues were 5 women, 3 of whom were married, each several years younger than her, and 2 of whom were recent college graduates. As the firm moved to new premises, their time was divided between running day-to-day business and packing paperwork for the move. Janna decided not to take family photos and personal belongings with her until they moved to a new office. Thus, her work colleagues learned about her and her family through conversations during lunches together and after a few after-work cocktail hours. Jane quickly made friends with her new colleagues, Nella, Meg, Alice, Susan, and Emily. Since the firm was called Windsor and Associates, Nell, Meg, and Alice called themselves the Merry Wives of Windsor and accepted Jean into their team as they had previously accepted 2 young and unmarried women, Susan and Emily. They learned that Jean was happily married to Philip, a partner in the architectural firm Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, and were able to conclude that Philip had a high 6-figure income and that Jean's return to accounting was not due to financial necessity. After several drinks, they came to the conclusion that Janna simply adores her husband. That time Janna said with a smile, "I came to work in the Skidmore accounting department, where I worked with foreign accounts, recorded the repatriation of profits, and transferred currency for tax purposes. I had just graduated from college and had virtually no work experience. I had been working there for about 6 months when I noticed this man, Philip, who kept coming in and asking me about accounting." Her memories of these events and 3 glasses of wine caused a slight giggle. His questions were completely meaningless. It was obvious that he knew nothing about accounting. It was also obvious that he had a crush on me, but was also incredibly shy, too shy to ask me out. Laughing, Meg asked, "And you have 2 children? How did this happen?" Janna answered, smiling. As usual, all the girls laughed heartily, and Janna continued, "About 3 more months passed, and finally, he plucked up the courage and asked me out on a date. The first date was dinner at an expensive restaurant, and then a symphony orchestra concert. From the very beginning, I noticed that he was an impeccable gentleman, very poised. He opened doors and held a chair for me, which is something that men don't do anymore. Our first 2 dates ended with a gentle kiss on the cheek. And on the third, he reached out and, taking me by the chin, lifted my head and kissed me. So tender and long." Janna remembered this kiss and the feeling of safety and security that enveloped her with warmth. Of course, she felt excited. A great feeling touched her heart just like she felt when her father hugged her. The feeling that this man would never hurt her, would not disappoint her, and would give everything for her. Janna continued, "When the kiss ended, I slowly opened my eyes and clearly remembered what I thought. That's who I'll marry. Later, I reproached myself for thinking so stupidly about it only on the 3rd date, but that was one hell of a kiss." Her friends laughed even more when she talked about her life, her idyllic childhood, her upbringing in a liberal Catholic family, her dreams of a Prince Charming. She shared a joke that Philip came up with shortly before their wedding. Philip said that Catholic girls make the best wives because before marriage sex is a sin and after it is a sacrament, and what good Catholic girl wouldn't want to receive the sacrament 3 times a night? Janna and her friends burst into laughter. "Philip gave me so much. A wonderful feeling of being adored, and what I would call the romance of a fairy tale. He is very romantic. Even after so many years, she brings me flowers on a whim. And when she tells me that I'm beautiful, it's because she really believes it. And I gave him something in return. Confidence. When we met, He was so painfully shy. He said that after he won my heart, he felt invincible. He could do anything. This confidence greatly helped him in his career. Everyone always recognized his genius, but only noticed him after he gained that confidence. I am happy that I had such a positive impact on his life. From other conversations that they had among themselves, the girls were able to conclude that Philip was Jean's first and only lover. The younger girls believed it was due to generation and Catholic upbringing. The cheerful wives found this strange. Jean did not look depressed and was certainly not a moralizing fanatic. It seemed unthinkable to them that such a bright, beautiful, and charming woman as Janna would limit her sexual experience to one partner. At one dinner with two young women, Susan, recently engaged, asked Jeanne, "You've been married for 16 years, and what do you think makes a successful marriage?" Janna replied, "Of course, love, but also trust and respect, but also the willingness to compromise." Emily interrupted, "Everyone says what a wonderful accountant you are and how valuable you are to the company. We all enjoy working with you. Everyone knows that you will become a partner, possibly within a year. Do you regret putting your career on hold to become a housewife and mother? Is this a compromise that you made to allow your husband's career to develop and yours to be interrupted? Did your husband give you the right to choose?" Janna replied, "It was completely my choice. When I told Philip about my decision to stay home after having my children, he said he would support any decision I made to return to work. I understand that this solution is not suitable for all or even most women. We are in a very privileged position. The opportunities we have are made possible by our incomes and our families. My father is a doctor, and Philippa is an architect. Both grew up in families with above-average incomes. We both graduated from college debt-free, and our families are always there for us if we need help. And Philip's career was already on the threshold when we decided to have children. I wouldn't call it a compromise. That's exactly what I wanted. And over time, I realized that I would rather be with my girls than go back to work. I am sure that many women think differently, and that is their right. I believe that a woman can have a career and at the same time be a good mother, and I will never criticize the choice of another woman." Janna continued, "By compromise, I mean a situation where there is a choice, and each of you has your own ideas. The best example was our honeymoon." Susan intervened. "He must have been good." "Oh, that's true," said Janna, and they all laughed in unison. "Philip is an architect, and his idea was to spend a honeymoon in Paris with its museums, art, Baroque architecture, and all this atmosphere of the late 19th century. I wanted to go to Hawaii. I was in Europe with my parents, and I really wanted to see Hawaii. So we made a compromise." "And where did you go?" The answer, to Hawaii, caused new, almost uncontrollable laughter. Janna continued, "It probably wasn't fair, but we were discussing this at my house one day, and I asked Philip to wait while I changed my clothes. In the bedroom, I changed into a cocktail dress, the quintessential little black dress I had just bought. Returning to the room, I said, 'This is what I'll wear if we go to Paris,' and I saw him smile gratefully. Without further conversation, I turned around, went back to the bedroom, and changed into the tiny, really tiny bikini I had bought earlier that day. I returned to the room where Philip was. He was reading some magazine. When I announced, 'This is what I'll wear if we go to Hawaii.' I can still see the look of surprise on his face and his jaw hitting the floor. He didn't have a chance. When the laughter finally died down, Janna explained that there are times when you have to give up something for the sake of a loved one. Before getting married, you need to ask yourself the question, am I ready for this? And what are my capabilities? Marriage also has its opportunity costs. This is the price of giving up other opportunities in order to have what you decide to have now. I was just over 22 years old when I got a job at Skidmore. I had a bachelor's and master's degree, as well as a professional auditor's certificate. I had a good salary, independence, and other better options than in my student years. First of all, dating is a completely different world. A college date means going to the movies and having an inexpensive dinner. In the working world, men, even young men, are more established, have more money, and usually, but not always, more common sense. A date in the business world means tickets to a play or concert, dinner at expensive restaurants and nightclubs, and sometimes an invitation to a weekend in some exotic location. When I married Philip, I knew what I was giving up. I was beautiful, smart, and brought up in the cultural, or, if you like, privileged environment of my parents. The best schools, dancing lessons, horse riding, good behavior, music. I knew that I was a suitable wife, in every sense of the word. But it turned out that in the eyes of more than one married man, I was also a suitable mistress. Before Philip, I had several dates with wonderful men. I was offered a weekend in Barbados, jewelry, an exclusive and luxuriously furnished apartment, and even a Mercedes car. These were my options, if I chose them. For me, marriage was not only a romantic adventure, but also a conscious, rational choice. And before making this decision, I thought a lot. Besides the fact that I was in love with Philip, I also valued his friendship and understood that if I made a mistake in marrying him without giving up other opportunities, it would destroy him. Whether you should get married or not largely depends on whether you are ready to take on such a commitment. In our marriage, there were not always rivers of milk and banks of jelly, but I can honestly say that, as in the Edith Piaf song Je ne regrette rien, I do not regret anything. Emily replied, "It's wonderful that your life and marriage have been so rich. But have you ever felt like your life, or rather your talents, were, well, if not wasted, then underutilized because you were stuck at home? After all, you are so talented, so well educated. How can you feel the same level of achievement when you vacuum the carpet, cook a meal, or change diapers? I'm not criticizing, but I'm wondering how I could combine the responsibilities of a wife with my ambitions and desires." Janna replied, "This once again speaks of the financial advantages that we had. I was focused on raising the children, but otherwise we had help. We had a wonderful housekeeper who did the cleaning and cooking. I took care of the kids, paid the bills, and managed our investments. Others did the routine work. I know how lucky we are. Many, if not most women, are forced to send their children to kindergarten while they themselves work, clean the house, etc. They get the unfun part of being a wife and mother while someone else takes care of their children, and it's very hard. I even had the opportunity to go back to college for training when the girls were 2, while my mother and mother-in-law helped look after them. I decided to take some introductory architecture courses to better understand Philip's work. While I certainly don't know how to design skyscrapers, I understand the basic concepts and can help him explain things to his clients in simple terms, so his PowerPoints and other presentations are much more client-friendly. This helped his career immeasurably, but more importantly, it brought us closer. We were able to spend more time with each other discussing and preparing presentations for clients. In addition, his wife's interest in his work and her support could not but affect his pride. And it wasn't a sacrifice. I liked learning something new. I think this is what made my time outside the profession even more useful than if I had stayed in accounting." Susan intervened. "Have you ever felt like you missed out by not trying at least some of these opportunities?" Emily joked, "She means men." Susan replied, "Not only men." Janna smiled. "I know that I said that I didn't regret anything, and that's true, but I don't know a single person who wouldn't think that his life could have turned out differently if he had made a different choice. I started piano lessons at an early age and was very good at it. Sometimes I wonder if I could become a concert pianist." Smirking, she added, "My legs are as good as Yuji Wang's." After laughing, she added, "In the end, it was not my choice for a number of reasons. As for men, Philip is not the first to propose to me. In fact, he is the third. The first was my college boyfriend. Tim was sweet, charming, very sincere, and incredibly handsome. Most guys who look this good are narcissistic, but not Tim. And although I really liked him, there was no spark or passion with him. The second one was more serious. He was older, very handsome, and extremely cultured. He said he separated from his wife, which turned out to be a lie. His wife had all the money, and he had no intention of leaving her. I agreed to have dinner with him sometimes. Since he was a member of the board of the Ballet Foundation, we often attended the ballet and the parties after it. I never slept with him or let him kiss me. I told him that broke up was not good enough, and his divorce had to be final before we could be intimate. He bought me expensive jewelry, which I refused to accept. He wanted to rent an apartment for me, to which I answered no. But despite everything, I began to fall in love with him. If I had let this continue, I know he would have taken me to bed. When he finally proposed, he said he was divorcing her, but it would take some time, which in itself said that this would never happen. One day, thinking about this, I imagined my future with him. I imagined Christmas alone, in a luxurious apartment decorated with antiques, with expensive paintings on the walls, boxes of jewelry, closets filled with designer clothes. But alone, without children, without grandchildren, without distant relatives. He won't be there, of course. He will be with his family, and only then will he come to me. Unless, of course, he replaces me with a younger model. The price of this option turned out to be too high. There were others I dated. Most of them were very nice men. Several people who had more ego than brains, and one who loved himself much more than anyone else. Then I met Philip. With him, I immediately felt a spark and something that grew into a level of desire that surprised me. As we continued to date, I saw his confidence grow, and I realized that I was inspiring him to grow. I also knew that I would never be just a trophy for him. I don't believe in the idea of soulmates, or that there is only one person we are destined to be with. With many of the men I dated, I would have had a happy marriage. Maybe. I never try to renegotiate my marriage. Perhaps I would marry a good and devoted man. On the other hand, I could marry a womanizer or someone who would be unscrupulously cruel. Philip is not perfect, and he can be infuriating at times, but he is the kindest, most loving husband and father anyone could hope for. Finally, the move to the new office was complete, and there was definitely a celebration to be had. Before Janna joined the firm, and before the additional work responsibilities that came with the move, the merry wives and the two young women had thrown bachelorette parties several times, and everyone, including Janna, agreed that the celebration was long overdue. While preparing for the celebration, Nell thought about Jean's seemingly ordinary marriage and asked her, "Will your husband allow you to go to the bachelorette party?" Some husbands don't want to let their wives go anywhere without them. Alice told me that she and Frank had a fight when she wanted to go. She defended her position, and he agreed, but according to her, the relationship was very tense for some time. He still doesn't like it very much, but he's come to terms with the fact that she's coming. This is her choice. Janna answered with a laugh, "Philip is my husband, lover, and best friend, but not my jailer. I told him that we were planning to spend the evening, and he told me how glad he was that I had such good friends at work, and that it was good for me to spend time with them. He trusts me completely. He knows he can do it." Everything was ready. They went to the Sans Souci Club, located directly next to the Le Méridien Hotel. The club was elegant and, in Nell's words, upscale. Dancing, drinks, limited menu, close to a four-star hotel with polite and very helpful staff. It was also very expensive, so men who went there were pre-screened for desirability. That Saturday, 6 women arrived together at 7 o'clock in the evening. Everyone was dressed smartly. Nell and Meg showed more cleavage than the others, but everyone looked very sexy. The head waiter, who had served the gay wives many times before, led them to a large booth. As they took their seats, Jean instinctively reached for the drinks menu. Meg smiled and took it away, explaining, "Honey, we never buy drinks for ourselves." A minute later, 2 waiters appeared with a tray containing flutes of champagne and 3 bottles of champagne on each tray. 1 bottle for each of them. Janna began to say that they had not ordered anything, but Meg touched her hand and smiled. The waiter said with aplomb, "Best wishes from the gentleman at the bar." Everyone looked towards the bar and saw a respectable middle-aged man at the end of the bar who smiled, nodded, and then turned away to answer a call on his cell phone. Meg smiled and said, I wonder who or how many of us he wants." A girlish giggle was heard in response. The waiter opened the bottles and poured champagne. The glasses were large and held about a quarter of the bottle. The men in the club admired the 6 women, but did not dare approach them to dance or chat. Grateful that someone else had bought the wine, they waited while their intended prey drank a few glasses of champagne, which would lower their resistance and, they hoped, increase their libido. The girls hurried to enjoy one and then a second glass of champagne. There will be more drinks later. Janna turned out to be less tolerant of alcohol than her colleagues, and she began to feel the effect of the second glass a little earlier. Encouraged by the second glass, she drank the third. The men circled around and then came closer. The younger women were invited to dance first. After some time, a man walked towards their booth and bought champagne. Alice remarked, "How delicious he is." Nell and Meg verbally agreed with their friend's assessment, using less delicate terms than delicious. Jean just smiled, appreciating the handsome man whose eyes were fixed on her. Approaching their booth, the man extended his hand to Janna. "May I invite you to dance?" She swallowed hard, and without saying a word, placed her hand in his. The orchestra played only slow melodies. It was assumed that the dancing couples were lovers or future lovers, and all physical activity would take place later and off the dance floor. The man kept Gina at a polite distance as they danced, smiling warmly at each other. Watching her friend, Meg remarked, "Wow, I didn't expect this." Nell replied, "I wonder what hubby will think," to which Alice replied, "She's not doing anything wrong." Nell intervened, "Not yet." And then she continued, "But perhaps she will be the first of us to have sex today." Alice replied, "She loves her husband. You heard what she said. She won't have sex with some stranger." Nell said with confidence, "Come on." She was caught quite tightly. Apparently, her husband is the only man she has ever had. She's already over 40, and if she wants to have some fun in her life, she better hurry up. On the dance floor, Jean thought about how handsome this man was, looking into his eyes. During the second dance, the man moved closer to her, and she felt herself melting in his arms. Champagne, music, his hugs, all this did not allow her to think about anything except this moment. He moved even closer, and she laid her head on his shoulder. She felt the warmth of his breath, and his lips brushed against her ears as he whispered, telling her how beautiful and desirable she was. Then, with 2 fingers of the hand holding her waist, he drew a line down her back, starting at the base of her neck, then moving down and back to her waist. The black dress was backless, and its touch on her bare skin tingled with electricity. The man heard her sigh slightly, and then purr. As he pulled her even closer to him, she felt his dignity pressing into her stomach. She had heard that men's assets differed in size, and that for some women size was everything, and she had always thought that was stupid. She knew that the most important organ was the brain, the imagination and creativity it could produce as wave after wave of neurochemicals washed over the senses. However, her thoughts drifted from the present moment to her imagination. She imagined them in the hotel room. Here he stands behind her, clasping her waist and covering her neck with soft, leisurely kisses. In her imagination, she felt him unbutton her dress, throw it off her shoulders, and lower it to her waist. His hands on the bare skin of her stomach slowly rise to gently cup her breasts. Unclasping her bra, he runs the backs of his fingers over the soft skin of her breasts. Her breasts are especially sensitive to touch, and for a man, they are the perfect combination of firmness and elasticity. She imagined the man turning her around to face him, his hands removing her bra, and it unceremoniously falling to the floor along with her dress. Her breathing, both in the present and in her imagination, quickened. Mentally, she looks at the man with a slight smile, pulling his jacket off his shoulders and sending it to the floor. She then removes the silk tie from around his neck, debating whether to use it as a makeshift blindfold or even to tie his hands. Imagining possible uses for the tie, she thought cheerfully, God, how spoiled I am. And suppressed laughter. Still fantasizing, she undid the buttons on his shirt and looked into his face as their open mouths connected in a passionate kiss. Taking off her shoes and leaving only silk stockings, she unfastened his belt and trousers, lowering them to the floor. On her knees, she pulled down his boxers, enjoying the view. She imagined him saying her name over and over again, accompanied by the words, "Yes, oh God, yes." He then lifts her up and wraps her in his arms, gently laying her down on the bed. Taking off his shoes and remaining clothes, he joined her on the bed. Continuing her fantasy, he stopped, looked into her eyes and smiled. The final act of intimacy between them began with kisses on her neck, closed eyelids and face, kisses going down to her chest. She heard her moans as if they were here and now, and not just in her imagination. Then there was a pause as the kisses trailed down her thighs, giving her a moment's respite from the passion that threatened to overwhelm her senses. Her thoughts returned to the present, to the dance floor, and his embrace. Janna knew that now she would belong to him. She will give herself to him, and make her fantasy come true. At that moment, nothing else mattered, nothing else existed. The other women watched her, entertaining their dance partners. Now the women were alone in their booth again when Alice spoke first. "Maybe we should intervene. She's very drunk. I don't want her to do something she'll regret later." Nell replied, "She's already a big girl and can make her own decisions. Besides, she has the right to have fun. And let's face it, even when we're drunk, we know exactly what we're doing. None of us would have sex with someone we don't want. Jean is simply horny, and an attractive man is well on his way to giving her a night she'll never forget." Alice replied, "Will he never forget? But will he always regret?" Nell answered Alice briefly and clearly, "There is no need to be a hypocrite. Do you regret kissing that guy the second time we came here and letting him fondle your breasts? How far have you come?" Alice answered, crying quietly, "Too far. Very far. When Janna talks about her marriage, I remember my own. For the first 3 years of our marriage, I always raced home before Frank so I could wrap my arms around him when he walked through the door. Yes, it happened that he came home too tired or too preoccupied with problems at work. We didn't always have sex, but when I looked at him, I looked straight into his eyes and let him know how much I loved him without even saying it. I did what was best for him. Now, sometimes, when we are alone, I see sadness in his eyes. Sadness that I'm no longer the girl he married, and I don't mean a few gray hairs or a few extra pounds. I'm not the girl who runs into his arms, tells him how much he is loved, looks at him with gratitude for everything he worked so hard to provide for us, and lets him know how happy I am that he chose me. Oh God, where did I go wrong?" Nell turned to Alice and squeezed her hand. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean—" "It's okay," Alice interrupted. "I'm leaving. I can't stay here. I can't do this anymore. I'm going home. I can't admit this to Frank, it will kill him, and of course it will be the end for us. But I can tell him that it is obvious that we have grown apart, and I want us to be together again. We were once so happy. I looked like Janna. I want it again. Fuck it. I want it again." Meg suddenly spoke up. "Everything is different for me. Remember the movie Love Actually, when Emma Thompson's character finds a gold medallion in her husband's coat pocket? She's so happy, and then for Christmas, he gives her a CD and she realizes the locket was meant for someone else. So it is with me. I don't know if it was just flirting, an affair, or an affair, but the necklace George bought was not for me. This happened 2 years ago. I never talked to him about this. The scary thing is that I still love him. I love him, but I had other men. I've been with other men. What a euphemism. I cheated on him. And after each time I returned home, locked myself in the bedroom, and cried. What did I do 2 years ago to make him stop loving me? All three looked up and saw Jeanne approaching their booth with the man she had been dancing with all evening. She was, if not drunk, then at least tipsy. All three froze, wondering what to do or say. Janna, holding the man's hand, reached for a glass of champagne, drank about half of it and put the glass away. Slurring her words, she picked up her purse, smiled, and announced, "I'm leaving." Janna and the man holding her hand moved from the booth towards the entrance to the hotel. After walking just a few steps, Janna stopped, hesitated, slowly turned around, and resolutely walked back to the booth. The man followed her with curiosity on his face. When he looked at her, she said to her friends, "Sorry, I almost made a terrible mistake." The three friends held their breath, waiting for her next words, and the man looked at her curiously, trying to understand what was happening. Janna took a deep breath and said, "Sorry, I'm a little drunk." Then, with an unexpected smile that lit up the room, she added, "And I forgot to introduce you to my husband." The man next to her smiled, nodded to her friends, and then turned to her, placing his fingers under her chin and pulling her face towards his for a kiss. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.